Welcome to the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast with psychologist Dr. Doreen Downing. Listen in as Doreen interviews people who felt they didn't have a voice or who suffered extreme speaking anxiety. You'll hear stories about how they struggled to speak up, what they did to find their authentic voice, and the confidence they now feel to speak up and make an impact. If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. And now, here is Doreen.
Hi, I'm Dr. Doreen Downing, and this is the podcast, Find Your Voice, Change Your Life. And I get to speak to people who are curious and want to explore what it means to have a voice, not only for themselves, but many times it seems people are in professions or in the health and care or the realm of supporting others, finding their voice. And today that's who I get to meet, is somebody who not only is curious for himself, but how to use our voice in a way that we wake up other people to what is possible for them. So hello, Peleg.
Hello, Doreen. So good to be here.
Wonderful. Let me tell the audience a little bit about you. You come from Santa Fe, and that's in New Mexico, and you call it, well, we all know it's called the land of enchantment. Oh, that makes me take a breath right now, just imagining enchantment. I love that word.
Yeah, it's pretty magical.
Yes. Well, you're the founder of Creative High Growth Method, and it's a soul awakening process that helps people at a crossroad find their purpose and authentic voice. You're speaking my language here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Peleg wears many creative hats. He is a trained spiritual director, an entrepreneur, an artist, a trained chef, a graphic designer, and a recovering overachiever. That's a lot under your belt, a lot of life you've lived, and it sounds like a lot of learning that you bring to what you do with folks. And because we want to start at least with your own personal journey, it's not what our podcast sounds like today that you want to really go into, and that's not what the story is. But let's talk first, because I know that you've shared some things with me about you early on finding your voice and what might have been the struggle for you. So please, if we could start there. Thank you.
Thanks, Doreen. You know, I've been thinking a lot about that term, finding your voice. And what I'm becoming more and more convinced is that it's not really about finding. Our voice wasn't really lost. It's more about remembering. It's more about remembering who we really are, because at some point, and I find this to be a very common human experience, at some point, we tend to let our authentic voice fall asleep. We tend to forget who we really are. I mean, think about us as kids. We know who we are. We have a voice. We're not afraid to use it, especially in creative ways. And as we mature, as we age, thanks to culture, society, parents, religion, you name it, we begin to hide ourselves, hide our true self. We have a voice and we express ourselves in the world, but it's not the voice that comes from our soul, right? And ultimately, the soul lives in the voice. So unless we are really connected to that part of ourselves and our soul, we'll move through the world feeling incomplete, feeling that there's something missing here. And I went through a very similar experience as well. My voice was really kind of shut down growing up early ages. I grew up in Tel Aviv in Israel, and I was bullied quite often as a kid. And speaking in front of people and sharing my voice was really never an issue. But the message that I received from the outside world was that, shut up. We don't want to hear what you have to say. And that created a belief system in me that I don't matter, that I don't have anything to say. And even though I want to say something, I really didn't know how, because of that, I had a belief that nobody really wants to hear what I have to say. So,
Yes, there's that. I just want to
yeah,
dive in here because what you said, where you started, was we have this already, what our gift, our voice, our soul. That's what we arrive here with, and then we have,
exactly.
we have this opportunity to speak up and speak out. And you said you were bullied. What, before you had that belief, what would you say was that magnificent you that had that expression naturally? What was that before you had to go hide?
I would call it love, pure
Oh,
joy,
uh-huh.
pure love.
Yes.
We all arrive with that, you know,
Uh-huh.
and what I found, what I've discovered after doing many years of my own inner work, all the inner work that I ultimately have done has led me to the place that I started from. It led me back home to me.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Uh-huh.
And that's a very sacred space for me right now. And I've learned to protect it. I've learned to nourish it. I've learned to uh, grow it, and um, uh, to walk through the world with this belief that I do matter, and that what I have to say, it may not be for everyone, but I'm not going to be afraid to say it and to express myself and who I really am and what I believe
Uh,
and what I do want to teach others. So that bullying was really a way of life for me. And throughout my early teenage years, the more I was bullied, the more I hid, the more I went inside. Right now, I'm also, I'm very much an extrovert. So it's not like I became this, wallflower and, didn't speak at all.
yeah.
No, I managed to create a life and to build a career and all of that. Right. And there was this part of me that was almost an act, in order to survive in the world, I have to put this act on so I can be liked, so I can
Uh-huh.
feel like I'm valued in the world. But there comes a point where that act just becomes exhausting, and we know that there's something more authentic, something deeper in us that we may not have access to it at the moment, but we know it's there. And I find that when people knock on my door and say, "Hey, I'm looking to find my voice,"
Yes.
I always remember that it has not been lost. There's
Oh,
no
I
finding
love
it.
that. I love that you are standing up for that point of view today and resonating out to the audience to this message that it's always been with you. It's just how do we now tap into it? But before I go there, I want to ask
Uh,
if you could just get a little more personal. Why did they bully you?
um, I'm a gay man, and I was as a kid um, very effeminate, and being a very effeminate boy in a very masculine, aggressive culture, as Israel was in the early '70s. Um, that was a lethal combination,
Oh,
So
yeah.
um, the
Whew.
problem was that the problem that I had was that at some point I began to believe the bullies.
Uh-huh.
I began to make it
Yeah.
my truth.
Yeah. That's what our brain does.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and it took me, years and years of therapy and coaching to ultimately let that go, change that belief system, get in touch with my true essence, but also learn to love myself enough
Uh,
to be able to speak from that voice.
Yes. And what you just said too, it's not just a wake up one day and you've finally expressed yourself more fully. It's a journey, a process.
The process,
And
for sure.
however, what I love about what you're saying is there must have been some sense of uh, calling, because now you're in the world, speaking up and telling people, well, you're teaching, not only telling,
Yeah.
teaching people and leading groups and, guiding people to who are on a journey, a personal journey to find their voice.
Yeah. It's a personal journey to come back home, to come back home to who they really are. And when we begin to have access to that part of ourselves, when we begin to remember that part of ourselves and nourish that part of ourselves, that's the beginning of the transformation.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a sacred process that not everybody's willing to go on, because it takes a lot of work, and we have to face a lot of dragons along the way and learn how to tame our inner critic. We learn how to recognize which part is my ego and which part is my essence, begin to learn to discern that. So that to me is the essence of being a spiritual person in the world. And I think that is one thing that all of us are seeking, who call ourselves spiritual people. Ultimately, we're seeking to know ourselves better, to have a connection to our heart and to divine energy that is always there, and we are the vessel to access it. So it takes work. It takes hard work.
Yes, I
And
so understand. And then
I'm sure you facilitate similar processes for people as well.
You're right, but I'm thinking about the beginning of my own journey. One of the beginnings was meeting somebody when I was at San Francisco State, and she had a program called Getting Clear, and it was actually called a stress reduction program, but it was actually so much deeper, and I heard her. And today I feel like I'm giving people an opportunity to hear you, that you will wake up people. They will say yes to you and find you and follow you. And what I did with her, obviously, she was doing much more than a stress reduction program. And we went to lunch, and I said, I want to know what you know. And she said, I'll teach you everything I know. And so finding a teacher or finding somebody that you go, oh, I want more of what she's having. And so who was that for you? Who were some of the early?
I can think of a few teachers that showed up along the way that really helped wake me up and teach me a new set of tools that I didn't have before to support myself. And I'm a firm believer that when the student is ready, the teacher will show up. And that's kind of the process that my life has gone through. The teachers just showed up at the right time when I was actually ready and ripe enough to do the work, right? And I've learned to pay attention when I meet someone who has something that I want. Just like you said, I want what she's got, right? I want what they have. I don't know why, but I'm listening to that voice, and I'm gonna say yes, and I'm gonna begin to study and apprentice and learn and integrate all of the learning and the tools that I've received from each one of these teachers into something that is new and different and more in line with who I am as a teacher, rather than repeating other people's work. It's about integrating the wisdom and the knowledge and the tools, and putting them through my own creativity, my own creative process, to create something that hasn't been offered before, that can support other people in this very similar journey that I've been through. Only took me 20 years. And the process that I've developed takes 100 days. So that's really the difference in the intensity of the work.
Oh, I want to hear about this process, but first I just want to tell people who are listening, who aren't able to watch you, that your gestures are about you brought your hands down into into your belly and your heart, and then you brought the hands up as if there's, reaching down and bringing up into the world more of what's inside of yourself. So I just wanted to note that I saw physically the embodiment of what you're talking about.
Thanks. I appreciate you noticing that.
Yes. And I'm thinking that you are on my program because I am drawn to what you're talking about today. Yes, there's techniques, there's Toastmasters, there's how do people get through anxiety and be more free to speak. But you are somebody that I am drawn to because it is a deeper dive into who we truly are and at our deepest level, and why we're even here in this world at this moment. So in a way, you're somebody that I'm drawn to. I just want to say that also, so everybody hears that. Doreen knows a lot, but she still has a lot to be able to stand up and say, it is work, folks. It's not just a technique. Look at somebody in the eye. Okay. It's way more than vocal variety, let's say. It's, if you really want to truly find your voice, and that's our conversation today, the true voice inside, it's work. So if you want to go on that inner journey, we've got teachers. So tell us, Peleg, creative high growth method. And you said it was 100 days. So talk about that. If you want to start talking more about what you offer, or
Sure. It's quite a it's quite a new process that was created 3 years ago, and the big idea was I believe in intensity, transformation and change through intensity, an intense process that kind of doesn't give us enough time to recover, but keeps breaking down walls. And that's really what this process is about. And I've done my own experiments on myself, making a decision or changing a habit, or paying attention to something in my life for 100 days in a row. And I've seen the power that has. I've seen the change that can happen from that. So something about the idea of creating a journey that takes 100 days was the initial idea. And honestly, creating the course was a very intuitive process. And the big idea is that we have 100 sessions in 100 days. And during those 100 and in a row, right? So there's no days off. We are working. Now I teach this course in a cohort. It's a cohort-based course. So we've just completed the class of 22 just graduated, and there's incredible power and magic in a group of people doing this work together. But the intensity of the work is a big key to its success of the process. The method is really based on two things: deep inquiry and creative self-expression. So every day inside of this process, we do exactly just that. And along the way, I teach tools that will stay with you for the rest of your life, tools that you can use to help yourself get back in alignment with your authentic self. Because as much work as we can do in ourselves, and I know you can relate to this, both of us have done, I think, a lot of work on ourselves, but we keep falling asleep. Yeah. This is just human nature, right? We keep falling back into old habits. The transformation process is not just a one-time event. It's an ongoing process, and it has its peaks and its valleys, but it's a continuous process, right? So that the tools that I teach in this program are really the treasure chest of what each student gets to walk away with. Now, along the way, they're producing an unbelievable body of work, and making art is a big part of the healing process, because making art will bring up our inner critic in the most severe way. And, many of my students are creative professionals, accomplished creatives, people who've had creative careers as designers and illustrators and photographers. And oftentimes you give them a piece of chalk and a blank canvas, and there's terror because the inner critic just kicks right in. Their inner perfectionist immediately kicks in, and guess what? We can't actually access our true voice if those voices are still running the show.
Yes,
So
that person I talked to you about before was an artist, actually, and she had a program called Growing from a Dot. And the whole idea was making life a work of art. But growing from a dot, we had a piece of paper and we had all those little sticky dots, what colors and what sizes. And then just the whole idea of choosing to put the dots where on the paper is, it brings up what are other people doing? And should I do? Yeah, I understand what you're saying about making choices and where those choices are coming from and what blocks making those authentic choices.
Yeah. So in a way, I think to find our authentic voice, as we call it, to wake up that voice, to remember that voice, oftentimes we have to go back to our early selves, to our childlike selves. And that's a big part of what my program does. Through art, I take you back to the beginning, to being 6 years old, to creating art as a 6 years old. And together during that process of the 100 days, there's a creative maturity that begins to happen because we are working on learning to tame that inner critic. We are learning to be the masters of that, not have the inner critic run us. By the end of that process, every person gets exactly what they need to get. Every person does come home to who they are. They have created a remarkable body of work. They have filled up pages and pages and pages and pages in writing and self-inquiry that they know themselves better now. So to be able to use my authentic voice, I need to know who I am first, right? That they go hand in hand. It's you can't not get to know who you really, really are and learn to love that part of yourself before you can actually express yourself authentically. Because otherwise, anything else will not be authentic. You may think it's authentic, but that's the trick here.
Well, you had two parts. The first one was inquiry and creative expression. So you're saying getting to know who you are is all about inquiry. And how do you keep that curiosity without the judge coming in and doubting and questioning you? It's the quality of inquiry, I think, is what leads you to the deeper creative expression, is what I'm getting from you.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. So it's been quite a ride. It's been quite a blessing, I have to say, to witness adults, people who are accomplished and successful and have so much potential and so much to offer the world, and yet there's a disconnection. There's a disconnection from soul. And I think we know when we're disconnected from that part of ourselves, because there is this longing that exists, a longing that is nothing else will quench it.
Yes.
And that longing is the language that I've learned to speak and learn to address and learn to develop the tools to help people satisfy their own longing.
Satisfy. I just want to say that again because it's so delicious to say. Satisfy their own longing. And that, I think, resonates out to people who are yearning and longing.
Yeah, I think oftentimes we believe that the longing will be satisfied through something outside of ourselves. you know, the career, the job, the relationship, the money,
Yeah.
you name it, right? It doesn't. It doesn't. And I think the point where I meet people is after they've really tried with all the conventional ways to get to that place in themselves, and they just haven't been able to, and they are beginning to realize that this is what matters most to me right now. For me to feel like I'm having a satisfying life, I want to know that I want to know who I am, because I keep saying yes and no to things that don't really align with who I really am. But they don't, because at some point I forgot. I forgot who I really am. And that is ultimately the work, is a waking up, a remembering. And when
Yes.
we begin to remember who we are, we begin to really, really remember, it's very empowering. It's an incredibly powerful space to be. It's like anything's possible from that place. Anything.
Yeah, I love your how you just expressed that, and it was just so certain. Definitely the certainty of knowing what you know and teaching what you know. Because we're almost out of time, I want to make sure that people know how to contact you. And it sounds like maybe you have another cohort starting. I don't know.
Yes. I teach this process once a year in January of every year. The next one will begin in January of 23. The date is not quite set yet, but sometime mid-January. And the enrollment and registration generally opens up in September. I invite people, if anybody's interested in learning more about this process, the creative high growth process, they can check out my website, which is pelegtop.com. Surely have a link somewhere, as you always do. And I really do believe that this process and this work speaks to the right people. You know, people know immediately if it's right for them or not. There's the enrollment process for this. There is an application process, because there is quite a commitment that I'm asking people to bring to this work. It's 100 days of meeting yourself every day for an hour and a half to 2 hours, doing this deep inner work, making art every day, meeting with a cohort once a week to have group meetings, having creative adventures on your own. So it's an immersive experience, and it's not for everyone. But for those who do come into this work, I've yet to see one person miss one day out of the 100-day process. And I've yet to see anybody complete this work and not go on to amazing, greater things as a result. So I welcome anyone who's feeling like they are ready to do the work. Yeah.
Well, wonderful. I'm glad that we'll get this out, and that people will be able to find you and listen to. I think just even listening to you today, it's a new kind of, where is voice? And it's not that it was beaten out of you. It was just, you had to, for some reason you had to hide, and that's okay. But it's now we get to remember, and we get people like you who say, hello in there. That's what we're doing. That's what this whole podcast is for me about, is hello in there, and welcome. Welcome. We are celebrating you. And that's what I feel like. I feel today that I've celebrated with you, Peleg. And thank you so much for it. Well, maybe one last thought that seems to pop up in this moment for you before we end.
Well, I generally end in my email signature. I always say, all is full of love. And it's kind of like becoming my go-to statement. And oftentimes I do believe that all is full of love. Is just up to us to be able to see it, to be able to connect to it. It's like, what lenses are we looking through so that we can actually see that all is full of love? Are we looking at the world through the lenses of fear and insecurity and self-judgment and overthinking? well, it's going to be hard for us to see love. It's going to be hard for us to connect to love. So I want to remind people that all is full of love. It's just a matter of where are you looking from? Where are you coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for this time and this opportunity to be in conversation. I love the work that you're doing in the world, and keep it up.
All right.
Soldier of love, what I call you.
Soldier of love. Thank you. Thank you, Peleg.
Thanks.
Thank you for being with us today for this episode of Find Your Voice, Change Your Life. Each person Doreen interviews shares what has helped them find their voice. You can learn from these guests and find your voice so you can be confident to speak up and speak out. And remember to download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. We hope you enjoyed the show and will return next time. Until then, goodbye for now.